We are very excited about our next guest. She actually gives great hugs. I've been hugged by Tina Brown. She's an award-winning writer and magazine
She's also
editor.
got a dagger of a pen, which we'll talk about.
Yes, that's true, too. Who has spent the past 3 decades chronicling the British monarchy. Brown's latest best-selling book is called The Palace Papers Inside the House of Windsor, The Truth and the Turmoil. This is an in-depth look at the past 25 years of the British royal family, something she knows a lot about. The new paperback edition includes the monarchy's most recent history, including the death of Queen Elizabeth. Tina Brown is also, we're proud to say, a CBS News royal contributor. Good morning to you, Tina. We had you on when the book first came out. So much has happened since since the hardback. But we spoke to you after Harry's interview with 60 Minutes, and at the time you hadn't read Spare. You have since read it, and you what do you have to say about that?
Well,
what surprised you most? What do you have to say?
It is a real raw cry of pain, this book, and extremely moving, I thought. Much more important a book, I thought, actually, than people perhaps might have expected, because he really takes on so many, issues about monarchy and the cruelty of the system.
Yeah,
it's pretty riveting. It is, of course, though, his very personal prism, because it's his memoir and should be. But, of course, the Palace Papers will give you everything that shaped that moment, essentially, and the rest of the family, who are in his book are only seen through the prism of his rage, really, about being marginalised as a spare, which is the hardest thing to be in that family. But, you see history repeating itself, and how Princess Margaret was also a spare, and how she struggled, in that system.
And she kept it in, too, Tina. She didn't talk about it.
She did not
talk
talk about it.
So I'm thinking, what's wrong when, according to Harry, he has tried a lot to reach out to the family, to work this out privately, to talk about the pain that has been caused. What's wrong with sharing that part of your life and your story? Because I know in the UK, it's not going over well, or at the palace, it's not going over well either.
Well, it's a mixed issue, because obviously the rockets that he's fired have landed on them, right? So they can't speak within their system. Their formality of approach means that they cannot respond. So they've had to sit there and sort of take the attacks, in a sense, without defending themselves. And I think that where I do find him somewhat unfair is about his brother William, because it's almost like he doesn't allow for the pain that William has been through. I mean, in Palace Papers, I talk about how Diana really came to depend on William. He was the older child, and they were very, very close, and she used to call him my wise old man, because he was a very sort of serious, sober child who, lifted up his mother a great deal. And it was very painful for him when she went through all of these very public affairs, and she, went on the Martin Bashir and did the book with Morton and so on. Because he was older, he actually suffered, you can't say more, because Harry was suffering tremendously, but he suffered a lot as the eldest boy. And, of course, he's had no choice in his life either. I mean, he's actually just got to get on with it and be king. And nobody asked him if he wanted to be, frankly.
Tina Brown, first of all, nice to meet you.
Thank you, David.
You wrote in a recent article, I suspect the next 2 months, to use a psychological term, are the Sussexes' extinction burst. What did you mean?
I actually meant, there's a psychological term, which means that, the extinction burst is when you just let it all happen. You just bring it all out and it leaves you kind of purged, if you like. That's clearly what he's been doing. This has been an extinction burst of Harry emotionally. The question is, will it be the end? Because the family will feel, OK, so you've had an extinction burst, but what about us? I mean, we're now bruised and battered, So it's almost when Harry goes on TV and he says, I now want to have a reconciliation. It's like, well, yeah, but we feel like Prince Charles is teddy bear.
We're still wounded.
We're still very wounded and battered, and kind of don't know where this has come from.
You've also called King Charles, and I love this, a transitional monarch. Doesn't seem like what every prince wants to be when they grow up. What do you mean by that?
Transitional monarch.
Yeah.
Well, he is a transitional monarch, and there's no getting away from it. He's, in his 70s. He hasn't got long to make his mark, and he waited and he waited. I mean, when the Queen in the last year of her life was constantly cancelling engagements. You had that moment when Charles, in her stead, opened Parliament, and the crown was sitting on this velvet pillow in front of him. And I felt that the thought bubble should have been, when am I going to put this goddamn, crown on my head? So he finally gets it. And of course, as soon as he gets it, his son starts to let rip. So he is, in some ways, Charles always used to, his great sort of motto was, oh, just my luck, he used to say.
Yes.
Well, it's sort of just his luck. Just becomes king and spare lands on his head.
Yeah, and there are so many people that wish William was king that it just skipped over. So
this book does not land on your head. You're such a good writer. I mean,
Thank
you're
you.
so witty. And the paperback, you can stuff it in a sun bag, kids. The weather's going to be warming. Now's the time. I do encourage.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tina Brown.
Thank you.
The Palace Papers is out in paperback now, wherever you like to buy your books.